The first full day since the redacted Mueller report came out. What's next in the battle? Well, a top Democrat joins me later on why they are subpoenaing the entire report today. That's big news. Also, a headline that would scare any White House. 14 new investigations that Mueller handed off, many of them unknown. We're going to get into that. And later, you know we cover all the evidence here on The Beat. Well, we begin tonight's show with some of the truly damning evidence of obstruction against Trump in this report. But I want you to know at the end of this hour, we will turn to a witness who faced off against the Mueller probe and came out in the clear. Carter Page, one of the Trump advisors, first caught up in this probe, will join me later live. But we begin with the news rocking Washington, even as the Trump administration tries to distract you from it. Tonight it is official. House Democrats formally demanding Bill Barr hand over the full, unredacted Mueller report by May 1st. Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler issuing this formal subpoena today. The move telegraphed during the past 3 weeks of sparring between Trump Attorney General Bill Barr, given his aggressive and we can now report often proven to be misleading handling of the conclusion of the Mueller probe. But let me tell you this, as we get into this news tonight, telegraphing you might do something and negotiating about it with the White House or the DOJ is different than action. Tonight is action. The first time the Trump DOJ is now staring down the pressure of a subpoena for Mueller's report. And that's not all. Democrats demanding that Bob Mueller himself testify by May 23rd. They are seizing on Barr's terse statement yesterday in what was, of course, his first major press conference as Attorney General, that Barr said he didn't object to Mueller addressing Congress. Speaker Pelosi clearly authorizing Chairman Nadler to take the lead on what is now the biggest fight of the Trump era right now. Tonight, he says Mueller's report busts President Trump for, quote, serious instances of wrongdoing. So what comes next? Well, I can tell you this, because it's a very live story. DOJ has now responded late here tonight on the East Coast, saying the subpoena is, quote, premature and unnecessary. That is a sign of the battle ahead. That's the DOJ not saying we'll work with you on this. We want to give you more. They're saying it's unnecessary, a.k.a. get ready for a big subpoena fight. It's especially important because, remember, Donald Trump went along with a House vote where he said, oh, all the Republicans are fine with getting the full Mueller report. Tonight, the DOJ is basically either showing that that was bull, not true, or the DOJ is just breaking with what was the Republican position, a kind of a claimed bravery in the face of the Mueller report. Well, they've seen some of it. Apparently, they don't want everyone to see all of it. And that's not all. This Trump administration strategy, as you know by now, has been to undercut the Mueller roadmap by falsely suggesting that it's all up to Barr to decide what happens with these findings. Well, tonight, what we're seeing is Chairman Nadler say no. Congress itself will consider the, quote, full scope, according to Nadler, of what is released here, including what he calls Donald Trump's misconduct. And I'll tell you something else, because America's been doing this. Maybe we've been doing it together. I've been reading this thing. It takes more than a day for the 400-page findings of a 22-month investigation to be clearly and fairly and accurately processed. And I mean that regardless of what you think is in here or what you want to be in here. It takes more than a day or two for this to set in. You can't debate what people haven't even digested. Now, this may sound like a challenge for the media era we live in, I admit it. It may be a challenge for the Trump era. But what we're seeing tonight, what I'm reporting to you, is that Chairman Nadler is leading a wing of the Democratic Party that is suggesting there are choices between do nothing over here and a rush to the I word over here. Dems also invoking Mueller's own words in the report, which show that even if one did agree with Bill Barr's conclusion, meaning he's the Attorney General, you can look at what he said and decide whether you agree or not, there is something that everyone can now see, and that Mr. Barr, perhaps in his cynicism, doesn't care if you can see that he was mischaracterizing Mueller's conclusion and letting that sit out there for the past 3 weeks. So here it is. Quote, the conclusion that Congress may apply the obstruction laws to the president's corrupt exercise of the powers of office accords with our constitutional system of checks and balances and the principle that no person is above the law. Mueller wrote that up for a reason, and he wrote it up in a way that it would be released, not easily redacted. In a moment, I will talk about all of this with the deputy to Chairman Nadler, the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon. I'm excited about that. I begin with analysis from David Corn, Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones, who's been covering this from the start, and E.J. Dionne, a columnist for the Washington Post. David, what do you see as significant about the way the Democrats are taking both Mueller's findings and also Mueller's admittedly intricate discussion of the inter-branch powers here and who ultimately deals with potential misconduct by a president?
You know, I hate to agree with you, Ari, but you're right. This report, over 400 pages long, does take more than a day to absorb fully. I've written a couple stories off it already. I'm still going through it line by line through footnotes, looking for things that I might have missed or that need further amplification. I think if you're running Congress, if you're the chair of the Judiciary Committee or the Intelligence Committee or the Oversight Committee, you need to go through this really carefully and say what here can we look at further, needs further investigation? What can we amplify for the public? Because there's a lot here that if you actually had people coming before committees to testify, it would mean a lot more. Hearing Don McGahn talk about how he had to put off what he considered to be improper or illegal instructions from the president would be really instructive for the public at large. And so I think taking a moment to figure out, okay, between doing nothing and rushing to impeachment, what is the right course here is exactly what Democrats should be doing. And there are leads here to investigate and aspects of the story and constitutional principles, which you're so good at elucidating, that need to be brought before the American public. And Mueller's done a good job in that regard of laying out those issues.
EJ, I want to play something from my colleague, Joe Scarborough, a former Republican congressman. He, like many people in Washington, began by noting that Mr. Barr did have a respected reputation in the mainstream conservative legal establishment. And yet, we do need to assess him by what he's doing now and not by the reputation he may have built in the past, because now is the news. Now is, according to some, according to Don McGahn, forget the Democrats, according to Don McGahn, now is what do you do about the constitutional crisis of a president of the United States who insists and repeats illegal orders. I pause because I want to be precise, but I'm quoting Don McGahn. And he did think they were so illegal that he would sooner resign than carry them out. And with that in mind, EJ, and we think about Barr, here was Scarborough on Barr.
He is not an attorney general in the common sense of the word. He is a political hack. When this presidency is over, John Mitchell will not be sitting alone as the worst attorney general in modern American political history. Right. He will be side by side by William Barr.
EJ, tough but fair or too far?
Oh, no, I think that's been true from the start. And I wrote at the time when he was before the committee in January that there were all kinds of red flags there and that establishment Washington just can't possibly see how an establishmentarian would become a Trump enabler. But he gave signal after signal that he was ready to do whatever Trump wanted him to do. And it goes back to that memo he wrote that many have called an application to be Trump's attorney general. But in the spirit of the holiday, and happy Passover and happy Easter to everybody, I want to agree with you on something, too. And I thought you made a really important point on the way forward when you said it's not just do nothing or go straight to impeachment. I think it's a mistake to take impeachment off the table because that would say this is not serious. But there is absolutely no need to rush for impeachment now because the Judiciary Committee and also the Intelligence Committee and the Government Reform Committee can do all the hearings that you need to do that would be in preparation for impeachment without having people think that you're rushing off prematurely. Because I think the argument that needs to be had is with that 10 to 15% of Americans who are not hardcore anti-Trump or hardcore pro-Trump. And as David said, they need to see some of these witnesses. They need to hear just what a horror show the Mueller report describes the Trump presidency as. And I think these hearings are going to have a great educational value for the American people.
Well, when you say that, I mean, part of my job is to try to fairly cover the law and present the evidence and let people make up their own mind. But the other part of the job, right, is being real about what's in here. And as I was going through more of this today, and like any serious legal document, just like a Supreme Court opinion, you read it more than once, and as you get deeper into it, understanding the holistic findings, you can understand other parts of it better. David, not unlike a novel, I know that you're big into literature, but more important than a novel.
Or a great book David wrote.
But more important than a novel right now, because it's true, the other thing that comes through in here, and that I'm going to bring in our member of Congress on, is the issues of what the first year of the Trump presidency looked like according to the people who were in it. This is not according to critics, and it's not according to quote-unquote observers who are out of it. The people in here, Priebus, Bannon, Rob Porter, Christie, after having private meetings with the White House, every single interview in the footnotes there, thankfully, are not redacted, is a portrait of a presidency hanging by a thread because of the lunacy and attempted illegal orders of the commander-in-chief. This is something that it would seem people should care about, even if the legal questions are more arcane. And so for that, I want to ask you both to stay, but bring in, as promised, Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon from Pennsylvania, Vice Chair of the House Judiciary Committee, which just subpoenaed the full Mueller report. First of all, thank you for making time for us this evening.
Thank you. It gave me a little break from my reading.
Okay, right. I think everyone's doing the reading. I want to get your views on all the big issues, but I will begin, as we do, with the breaking news from the Justice Department, which is not engaging Chairman Nadler and as Vice Chair, your subpoena as a kind of debate over how to do it, but rather saying, blanket tonight, immediately, it's unnecessary. Your response?
Well, my understanding, I haven't seen their response, but I read a tweet about it, which seems to be how we get so much of our news these days. And I saw that they said it was premature, which obviously we disagree with.
Yeah, and let me say for your analysis, we could put up, I believe, on the screen, we'll pull it up because we had it in our newsroom. Premature and unnecessary was part of the way DOJ details it. So, yes, your response to that.
Well, it's obviously very necessary. We're looking at two different things here. We're looking at what the Department of Justice and Mr. Barr, as now apparently a defender of the president rather than acting as the Attorney General, has decided to do. I mean, the Mueller report lays out very clearly that there are serious issues here, particularly around the issue of obstruction of justice. He gives us a roadmap in what Congress has to do, and we need the full report and the underlying evidence in order to be able to follow that roadmap.
And let me ask you, when you look at the obstruction section of this report, at the risk of oversimplifying it, but for people who aren't following every little moment, you could describe I'm talking about the criminal level, not other opinions, I just mentioned some, but at the criminal level, the conspiracy section of the report, I think, looks broadly good for the president. Because at the criminal level of the high beyond a reasonable doubt standard, there's no finding of a conspiracy. The obstruction section lists several incidents that look very bad for the president, because by the same criminal analysis, they appear to find evidence of obstruction. Are you ready tonight, and I'm not rushing you because I know it may take more time, but are you ready tonight to say, do you view, speaking for yourself and not the whole committee, that section as a finding that Donald Trump did commit obstruction, or how would you put it?
Well, I think what you have to do when you look at that section is look at how Mueller frames it. I mean, I always had respect for the man. I didn't know him personally, but now as we sort through this very intricate document, as you mentioned, he's really done a brilliant job of laying out the issue here. And if you look at the first page of Volume 2, which is the obstruction volume, he says exactly what he's doing and why. He says, first of all, I went into this knowing that there's a Department of Justice rule that you cannot charge a sitting president. So I'm not going to make any conclusions about charging this president. Second of all, that's Congress's job. If a president were to obstruct justice and the criminal justice system can't deal with it, then it's Congress's job to deal with it. Then he goes on to say, if I had found conclusive evidence that this president had not obstructed justice, I would say so. Unfortunately, I cannot, and there is no exoneration in my report. No exoneration. And then the fourth thing he does is say, okay, I'm going to lay out everything we found so that we can preserve the evidence, and whether that's for Congress or for some sort of post post-presidency indictment, he lays out exactly the evidence, including 10 separate incidents which look like obstruction of justice.
What do you mean by that, Congresswoman? You read Mueller as holding out the legal possibility of indicting the president for the obstruction evidence after he leaves office?
He certainly seems to suggest that's an option.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with that part of the report because he does walk a reader through some very complicated constitutional issues, but ultimately, and I think this is the right position, he says there has to be a way for the government, for one branch of the government, to make sure that the pursuit of justice cannot be corrupted even by the President of the United States. And if the Justice Department can't go after him directly, that job is left to Congress, like the Congresswoman here. He's very clear on that. It makes Barr's letter, in which he took it upon himself to exonerate Trump on this, seem rather silly. You know, Mueller's saying, per Justice Department policy, I can't indict, but Barr says, per me, I can exonerate. And if you look at the whole report, you know, from the first volume on too, you see just this miasma of lies and deceit. And Mueller portrays it in a very just the facts manner, but putting it all together there, I think it's pretty stunning, the portrait of the presidency, the president, and the campaign he ran.
And if I could just say quickly, I think that's
EJ, I'm going to give you time. I want to throw one idea at you in addition to your final thought, EJ, which is a lot of last night's initial understanding of the report required fact-checking Mr. Barr because he had been so blatantly false in letters, in formal statements to Congress, which matters, the Congresswoman knows, and then in a press conference he insisted on holding yesterday before people saw the report, that became part of it. I wonder what you think, EJ, in addition to whatever else you're going to share with us in your insights, about what people see on their screen right now. If you read the headline on the screen, this is the news, and the headline is Mueller's bottom line was that Trump, according to his own aides, was pursuing more than one Saturday night massacre, which is what ended Nixon. And the only reason he didn't pull it off was because there were people around him who defied him. EJ.
Well, I think one of the reasons it's so important for Mueller to testify is that line in the report when he says no person is above the law. And what the Congresswoman and David both said is that on the obstruction, he is sending a signal that I didn't say that he was innocent. I was bound by these Justice Department rules, but I really think that he needs to be held accountable. And I think that Mueller needs an opportunity to expand on that and talk about how radically Barr distorted what the report was. I was really struck when that letter came out that the report, the part he quoted, said that they couldn't establish collusion. And then Barr rendered it as you couldn't demonstrate or whatever conclusion. It was a very different word. And just those two sentences showed how much Barr was rewriting this for the president's purposes. And you saw that in right an hour before the report came out.
I have to fit in a break given all the other guests. And Congresswoman, because you're a sitting member of Congress, and because we're out of time, I'm going to end with my bad holiday joke for David Corn instead of for you, with your blessing.
Okay.
David, we had so much to talk about. I didn't even get to ask you why this night is different from all other nights.
Well, this is the first night of the day after we've had a report demonstrating that the president, just can't not lie about so many different things. I mean, it's historic. I don't want to end with a joke on this, but the good thing is I think it has reset the debate, despite what Barr tried to do, and the Congresswoman and others and other Americans are going to continue absorbing this and following where it should go.
And we will reach the promised land at the end of all of this.
EJ's the Catholic optimist here.
EJ rose to the spirit of the question more than you, David, which was surprising, but that's why we don't profile people. I would just say that for some of us, this is a holiday where you say, look, let my full report go. Let's see the whole thing.
Oi.
Congresswoman, we're leaving you out of this because of our respect for your seriousness and your position. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.